Poker is one of the most popular card games in the world. A lot of people have become multimillionaires playing poker.
The ace of hearts, and that will do it!
9-year-old Atlanta resident is on top of the poker world.
What a battle it was.
But most people lose money, 85 to 90%. The rules are simple, but the strategies and theory needed to play it at the highest level are as complex as chess. There's two ways to win a hand in poker. Have the better hand after all rounds of betting are done, or have everybody else fold after you make a bet. You don't always need to have the better cards. If you can make your opponent think you have better cards than them, also known as bluffing, they'll surrender and you win the money in the middle. You have to bluff if you want to be profitable in poker, at least versus good opponents. But if your opponent could see your cards, your bluffs wouldn't work and you'd lose money, which ties into the fundamental theory of poker. Every time you play a hand differently than how you would have played it if the cards were face up, you lose. If you made the same decisions that you would have if you could see their cards, you gain. The same is true for your opponents. If they played a hand differently than if they could see your cards, they lose. If they played it the exact same way, they gain. Most poker theory ties into that concept in some way, shape, or form. How do we see our opponent's cards? The same way you make reads on cards in Yu-Gi-Oh! You draw conclusions from the actions and inactions that have happened. But wait, our opponent is doing the same thing. How do we stop our opponent from seeing our cards?
You're so balanced.
You have to bluff if you want to be profitable in poker. Let's say you decide you're not going to bluff. Every few hands, you need to put in money no matter what your cards are. Let's say $1. Every few hands, you lose $1. Then a few more dollars. You finally get one of these hands, you raise the bet, and your opponents all say, damn, this guy only plays with good cards. We fold. You won $1, but you lost $5 earlier doing so. That's an easy fix though. Just play more hands more often. Which comes with the side effect of risking more money more often, and also means you end up in spots like this where you need to stay balanced. You can't bluff too much, you can't bluff too little. When you push all of your chips into the middle, you need to balance this decision and every other decision at a poker game with bluffs and non-bluffs, or else your opponents will see your cards. In Yu-Gi-Oh!, or at least in retro formats, you should apply this concept to both your deck building decisions and your in-game decisions. 2 years ago, all of the Vayu Turbo players had decks that looked like this. 3 Raikos, 1 Charge, 1 Hamster. I would set Raiko, and people would normal summon stupid cards like Treeborn Frog or Vayu or Plague Spreader Zombie and attack into my sets. At the time I was thinking, what in the flying f*** are these guys doing? How can you be that certain that my monster is Raiko? Another thing people frequently did was not commit anything to the field versus a set monster because they don't want to lose their cards to a potential Raiko. The old Vayu lists that everybody were playing at the time were not balanced. Attacking with Treeborn Frog exploits setting Raiko turn 1, and most of the time the Vayu player's set monster was Raiko. What did we do? We balanced our sets. Oh, you want to normal summon Treeborn Frog and swing into my set? That'll be at least 2,700 life points, thank you very much. Oh, you don't want to commit anything because you think this is Raiko. I sure hope you don't lose the game off of that. And in game 2, after they see Hamsters and Spirit Reaper and play around them by committing to the field, we will sometimes flip Raiko and punish that play too. Our opponents are always in the dark versus us. What if you don't play flip monsters? Here's a game from a casual tournament. I'm the Vayu guy and I finished my round early and saw my opponent was on zombies. Good info to have. I go for a standard T set. From his POV, I could have something like Raiko Prison set. We don't want to attack with Goblin Zombie and eat a D prison. We also don't want to lose Pyramid Turtle to a potential Raiko. So this guy decides to set his Goblin Zombie and set Yada. So if Raiko targets either of those, he gets a +1 after Raiko dies. That's a good opener if this card is Raiko, and if your opponent plays as if they could see your cards, they gain and you lose.
Surprise, motherfucker!
Whoa! And if they would have played it differently if they could see your cards, you gain and they lose! Didn't expect Neo's Alias there, did ya? This was our hand. We felt like playing Hero Beat, and with Hero Beat, most people are gonna turn off their brain and say, Unga Boonga, normal, normal, normal. I see monster, I summon monster. Are there any advantages to normal summoning Alias versus zombies turn 1? Yeah, sure. You can bluff Gemini Spark, and none of their turn 1 monsters can run over it. But most of their monsters can't run over a defense position alias, and they're going to play around Gemini Spark anyways, so you don't really gain that much. Can we think of any advantages to setting Neos Alias?
He flipped it.
Wait, he set a turn 1 alias. Oh my god.
That is just a trolliest shit I've ever seen.
Yeah, like what are you accomplishing with that?
The guy commentating, that's just the trolliest shit, is a YCS winner. He didn't even consider setting Neos Alias as a possible play, and even after seeing the play, he didn't recognize the merit. For starters, we keep our deck choice secret. You'd make a different turn 1 and turn 2 play versus different decks if you knew what they were and what they're possibly setting. Would setting Alias make our opponent play differently? Absolutely yes! Maybe he reads this as a Raiko and goes for a greedy mind control without a tuner to convert it. Maybe he doesn't want to lose valuable cards to a potential Raikou, so he doesn't commit those to the field. Pyramid Turtle and Goblin Zombie can't run over Neos Alias. 1300 is too big for those cards, and nobody in their right mind is going to risk losing Zombie Master this early in the game. He would need Mystic Tomato and either MST or Heavy Storm. And I don't think even if he had that combo, that he'd use it for a tomato attack. If we just give away free info by normal summoning Alias, he doesn't set Goblin Zombie here, he sets Turtle. Because we set Alias, we snuck in an extra 1900 points of damage, which can be the difference between losing a match and winning a match. Every advantage matters. Here's another example where I'm playing Frogs. Frogs either set Treeborn Frog or dupe Frog, right? Well, 10-foot doesn't have his Treeborn set up yet, so we should pressure before he gets his grave set up, stabilizes, and regains some field control, right? Oh, it wasn't a frog, he just baited us into overcommitting. One decision to set a card that isn't normally set won us the game on the spot. Always consider the possible payoffs to setting cards that aren't normally set. We could even call them bluff set monsters. Stay balanced with every decision. Stay balanced with your back rows too.
I hardly ever get Pro Storm, but it seems to be only against him for some reason.
It is correct to set multiple versus me, but I'll make sure to get value out of my Heavy Storm when I have it. And that idea isn't limited to just setting Heavy Storm. Set your Upstart Goblin, set your Brain Control, set your Reinforcement of the Army. Those can all potentially be dangerous traps, and your opponent will need to take risks to gain info that they aren't. And they won't always be willing to take those risks, which gives you time to catch up with more draws. Some people come to me for coaching, and there'll be a spot just like this, and in the replay they just surrender. Oh, he's gonna attack me and I lose. Set your Brain Control. He doesn't know it's not Mirror Force. You'd set a back row if you had Mirror Force, so give him a reason to think you have Mirror Force. Balance your thinking. Bluff think. Oh, this guy only spends extra time thinking when he has a tough decision. Therefore, we can deduce that he has a card that can respond to our play. Do we activate Mirror Force in this spot? I don't know, it's kinda tough. I'll save my Mirror Force for next time. Whoa, he's going for Bryonac to bounce my cards? Suck a dick! It was Solemn the whole time! Here's a 2-for-1 special. We need to bluff a back row or else our opponent is going to get a bunch of advantage if he knows it's completely safe. He just summoned Fortress and attacked. So we can't bluff Bottomless, Deprison, or Mirror Force. He summons a gadget. From his POV, it's possible that my back row is pulling the rug. And if I did have pulling the rug, I'd think about if I should use it now or if I should save it for Machina Gear Frame. And if this was Rug, I would let this through. Thinking here for 10 seconds convinced my opponent that the card is Rug, and look what happens. I saved 1800 life points and stopped 2 searches. Stay balanced. Every advantage matters. Should you activate Allure of Darkness? Right now. No darks. If you could see the future, like me, you'd know what your next draws are, and if you should use it right now. So how do you see the future? I knew you'd say that. The first step to seeing the future is seeing the possible futures. So for this problem, there's 4 possible futures. You draw 2 darks, dark plus non-dark, non-dark plus dark, and 2 non-darks. So given that 3 out of 4 futures favor you, are you more likely to hit, or are you more likely to miss? The answer to that depends on your deck. If you have 0 darks, you're gonna fucking miss every time. In this example, we have 13 darks left in our deck. You could spend a minute adding up whatever these 3 percentages are, or just calculate what the chance of missing is, and then subtract that from 100%. That's how you figure out the probability of a not event, or opposite event. If we know the chance of heads on a coin toss is 50%, the chance of not heads is 100% minus the probability of heads, 50%. If the chance of missing is 34.5%, the chance of not missing is 65.5%, and the math checks out. And that's how you should approach it if you only have a basic calculator. There's also combinatorics calculators like Yugioh.party, which saves even more time in case you're playing online. In poker and Yu-Gi-Oh, you should always be thinking about how future cards are going to affect the current spot. In Yu-Gi-Oh specifically, cards that you draw and cards that your opponent draws. That's actually a separate concept, but probability heavily ties into it. In this example, we don't have to risk missing. We're not being pressured right now. You also have to consider things like, do you want to throw away the first dark you see? Holding a lure makes it more likely to see multiple darks, which gives more flexibility. No pressure? I'll wait for the percentage boost. And now that we're facing pressure, there's a reason to take the risk. And knowing that we're way more likely to hit than we are to miss helps us go for this play. Probability can also be used to guess what your opponent's cards are. See their cards. Categorizing your opponent's unknowns into things like not flip monster, not battle trap, not specific card, not chainable, and then making decisions based on things like that will help you gain even more advantage. We target the back row here because he just used a bottomless. So this card is way more likely to be a not bottomless. But you will sometimes get punished by the second bottomless, and that's okay. If you're making decisions based on math, you'll come out ahead in the long run. It's a marathon, not a sprint. But don't use low probabilities as an excuse to run face first into cards like Torrential, Mirror Force, or Gores. Your opponent is always going to have cards. They have to draw something. Oh my god, he drew that hand, even though not that hand was more We all know that guy, don't be him. Probability is a tool, not the only thing to consider. For instance, in this spot, our opponent could very easily have Gores here, or a bunch of monsters weaker than ours. If he doesn't have Gores, I'm happy because I'm still in the driver's seat, and if he does have Gores, I don't lose on the spot from running into it. My opponent didn't have Gores this time, but I'm still happy with the decision because there will be a Gores here often enough. Here's a very similar spot. Pay attention to all the information people give with their actions and inactions. You know set cards here are generally level 4 or lower monsters, sometimes Sirocco. Set cards here are usually traps, sometimes spells. And given this particular game state, you should ask, why is he holding so many cards in his hand? Does he have a hand with Gores and random cards? Or does he have a handful of monsters that he can't commit to the field? Looking at his graveyard, of the monsters that are possible, he's used a copy of almost every single one. The chance of him having a combination of all the remaining copies of his monsters with no spells or traps to set is going to be much lower than the chance of him having a lone Gores. We apply the same idea here as we did in the other spot, and that helps carry us to a win. Here we have 3 options. Attack with Armor Master, Summon Caius, target Armed Wing, Summon Caius, target the back row. If you want, you can pause the video and see what you'd do. Tia decides to attack with Armor Master. He said he assumed that this back row is either Solemn or Book of Moon since he hasn't seen those cards yet. Here's what he should have done instead. Pull up a standard value list, cross out cards that are used, count the number of possible back rows that lethal him if he attacks with Armor Master, count the number of top decks that lethal him during the opponent's next turn with that play. If we attack with Armor Master, we lose to 2 back rows, Prison and Return. We also lose to 4 top decks. If we summon Caius and target the back row, we also lose to 2 back rows, Book of Moon and Solemn, but now we beat Prison, we beat Return, and we also beat the occasional set Brain Control misplay. More importantly, we now only lose to 2 top decks. We don't lose to Sirocco anymore. You don't have to calculate any fancy probabilities. You lose to less cards, so it's a higher value play. Let's look at the last possibility. Target Armed Wing. We lose to 3 to 4 possible back rows, Solemn, Prison, Return, and the misplay set Brain Control. But if our attack does go through, we no longer lose to top deck Plague Spreader or Caius. There's more life point damage potential, so there's a decent argument for this play as well. Now, given the specific variable values in this situation, you can calculate why one target is better than the other. But it's impractical when you're playing in a timed event. You will find yourself in complex spots with limited time, but being able to confidently eliminate the worst options will give you an edge over people who are completely in the dark. It doesn't matter what this back row ends up being, what matters is how you approach and set up the problem. I personally wouldn't consider Book of Moon as a possible card post-side, so I might get a different best play compared to somebody else who does. Everybody has 20/20 hindsight on what would have been the best play if they had full info on unknowns, but you can't decide a play was correct or incorrect based on hindsight. You should rely on numbers to decide. People will often get rewarded for making incorrect plays and punished for making correct plays. As one poker pro said, I offer these dire statements to warn you about listening to your opponents at your local card rooms. Advice you get from regular players will nearly always be wrong, oversimplified, and unhelpful. These guys don't know what they're doing. They really don't. Learning from them will merely keep you at their level. Be very careful of advice you get from random people. You will often get hindsight analysis or ridiculous stories on the time suboptimal cards were good. Every card or decision can be good or bad depending on the situation, but you want the best possible cards and the best possible decisions on average.
Dodge a king, jack, or 8.
The river card. Oh, is an 8! A crushing blow to Matt Affleck.
Shows his ace-5.
And there it is! Good game. Good luck, everybody.
1 out. It is a live out. 8 of spades. Still left in the deck for a big double up river card. Is the 8 of spades? It's a straight flush, and Eric Seidel is eliminated. Oh my! 1 outer on the river.
He's not throwing stuff. He's not flipping the table or anything. Where's my tangent going? Yeah, so I guess RBT events. Okay, yeah, I guess he threw something. Never mind.
These people just missed out on hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Good game. Good luck, everybody.
Smile, handshake. Meanwhile, you'll see people freaking out over way less in Yu-Gi-Oh! Because they're not professionals who actively work at or even consider the mental game. Tilt control is its own game. This is a good book that I'd recommend if you need a starting point. One of the strategies you'll need to heavily rely on before mental game weaknesses become resolved is called injecting logic. There's several distinct kinds of tilt in poker that are also present in Yu-Gi-Oh! And knowing the different kinds of tilt, here are some things to keep in mind. You cannot control what cards are dealt. You can only control how you respond to the cards that are dealt. Variance is part of the game. Poker and Yu-Gi-Oh! Are fun because anybody can beat anybody. If you were to play 10 games of chess versus a computer, or anybody who's better than you would lose all 10 games, and it wouldn't be close at all. But in Yu-Gi-Oh! And poker, the better player won't beat the worst player every time. Not even close. The noise of hand-to-hand or match-to-match results often hides the edge the better player enjoys. Throw in a little old-fashioned self-delusion, and many people play for years and years, thinking they are among the best players in the room, while actually being among the worst. It should be an expectation that you will sometimes win games you have no business of winning. And it should be an expectation that you will lose games that you were a heavy favorite to win. All of that is part of the game. You don't deserve to win or lose any game you play. You have a percentage chance to win and a percentage chance to lose. And sometimes those low percentage chance events will happen. The possibility of getting sacked and losing should always be an expectation before going into any game. You will lose sometimes. Variance doesn't care at all about what you think is fair. Deserving is an imaginary concept. Number 3. However bad you think variance can be, it's worse. It's a lot worse. This is a distribution graph for a poker player that makes 10 big blinds an hour on average, which, by the way, is the top 10% of poker players. At the high ends of the distribution or simulation, you might be winning a bunch. You might also be losing a bunch. The best poker players in the world will have years where they make negative $10 million and they say, damn, I sure hope this doesn't happen again next year. Oh, what was your salary again? Negative 10 million. I worked overtime too. In Yu-Gi-Oh terms, that could mean topping every event you play in for a year, or not topping anything at all. There will be win streaks and lose streaks. Number 4, you will sometimes get punished for making the correct play. Your opponents will sometimes get rewarded for making the wrong play, or ridiculous card choices. Number 5, you are not a robot, neither are your opponents. Mistakes are expected, but with enough practice, you can get to a point where they occur less frequently. Number 6, there's always something to learn or improve on. The instant you think you don't have to keep improving is the instant you get overtaken. And number 7, it's a marathon, not a sprint. And that doesn't apply to just one match, or even 1 or 2 tournaments. It's the marathon of all tournaments that differentiates the top players from the lucky players. Anybody can top or win when the cards are going their way. But when you look past the noise of good luck and the noise of bad luck and focus on the average game in between, are you able to navigate through situations where other people stumble? If you and your opponent swapped cards in a match, would they be able to achieve the same result as you?
One of Edison format's best, 10FD.
Basically, a god of Yu-Gi-Oh!
Would they have made the same decisions as you? If you want coaching or side guides, you can find that at patreon.com/10foot/shop. Thank you, Patreon supporters, for making this video possible.
10 foot is a genius.